Hello, everyone. We are delighted to have an opportunity for another Black male professors interview series with Dr. Goldburn Maynard. Once again, my name is Donaldson Conserve. I am an associate professor at George Washington University and the founder of the Black Male Professors and Researchers Collective. And as part of these interview series, we hope to highlight the positive and exciting works different Black male professors are doing, and to also inspire younger Black men and other non-Black men as well, who may become interested in research and want to learn more about the process for becoming a researcher or a professor. So I'll pass it to Dr. Maynard to introduce himself and share a little bit about, where he is now and a little bit about his journey.
I'm Goldburn Maynard. I'm an assistant professor at the Kelley School of Business at Indiana University in Bloomington. I was once upon a time an attorney. I then taught at a couple law schools before moving over to a business law department at a business school about 3.5 to almost 4 years ago. So now I teach business ethics classes, but I still do most of my research in tax and wealth inequality.
Thank you. Thank you. I'm wondering if you could start if you could continue by sharing a little bit about where you're from, what made you become interested in becoming an attorney, and the amazing, work you were doing in that space, and how that, ties into where you are now.
Mhm. So I grew up in Brooklyn, New York. Uh, and I once upon a time I was a English and history major in college, and I actually thought that I would go on to pursue my PhD in literature and become a professor of literature. As I got closer to graduation, I got a bit more afraid given that I do not come from a rich family. So I wanted to do something a bit more practical. So I decided to go to law school. And so upon entering law school, my interests were always kind of in civil rights, equality law in general. Uh, but then kind of things took a turn. I thought I would go on and become a civil rights attorney. But then I worked at the ACLU after my second summer of law school and decided that that's not the work that I wanted to do in the long term, just because those cases take a real long time to develop. And I actually found it to be kind of just too much of a long time horizon. I was a bit too impatient. So ultimately, I decided to become a tax attorney, actually. And so I practiced tax law both at a law firm and at the IRS for several years. And then I decided to come in and become a professor. I was encouraged by one of my former professors. And so I continued to do tax work, but still very much focused on inequality. And so, right, the idea behind my tax work is that the tax system is this very rich source for redistribution, and how can we use the tax system to redistribute?
Very, very exciting. I was particularly pleased to see that you do work, as a tax attorney, but also you work with estate planning. I believe I saw. I wonder if you could also share a little bit about that work as well, because it's so important for all communities and especially our community.
So when I was at the IRS, I actually was an estate tax attorney. And so my work was focused on the estate tax, which really is just a tax that is levied on wealthy individuals when they pass away. And so through that work, I got a lot more interested in the way that wealth is transmitted in the United States and the influence that it has generationally over many generations. And so, because of that, I also got more interested in wills and trust and that work and just right the differences in culture and how that can impact whether individuals do any kind of planning for death or not.
Okay, okay, okay. Well, I'm curious to just find out, a little bit more, of course, about, well, I personally I've been trying to establish a trust and a will. And if you were, before we go back to research and academia, if there are any nuggets you feel comfortable sharing that, people listening, things they should be mindful of, regarding wills and trusts and estate planning.
Uh, I would recommend that everyone try to plan. Excuse me. I know that it's something that people don't necessarily like to think about, not something that I like to think about, not something that my parents wanted to engage in at all. But planning can be helpful. It's not necessarily about you, but helpful to your family at a very stressful time when it can be really difficult to decide what needs to be done. And so, to the extent that you can provide your family with some plans as to what you wanted, that can be really helpful. In terms of trust, wills, etc., right? I don't think that I have any kind of preference or that I recommend anything specific to people. However, I always recommend that people get advice. That's really important. I've seen a lot of bad do-it-yourself jobs
Okay.
on this kind of planning, and so I always recommend that people get advice and that it doesn't need to be anything fancy, but just that you get some advice from someone who knows better.
Okay. Like a lawyer, maybe, tax
Yeah.
attorney.
Optimally, a lawyer that has done this for a while. Not to say that there aren't other professionals who know about this, but generally, since I'm a lawyer, I tend to stick with attorneys, and I tend to be skeptical of people who may be just financial planners who are telling you about law.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Well, I hope, this helps someone, and I know it's going to help me as I move forward. Now, you share you spent, your career as an attorney working at the IRS, and in a law firm. And one question, one idea I'm thinking is, you could have transitioned into a faculty position at a law school, but that is not what happened. And I'm curious, I'm curious if you can, share what influenced your decision to choose to, work in a business school as opposed to a law school.
hmm And so my career did begin at law schools. And so for about the first 8 years of my career, I was at
Okay.
law schools,
Okay.
and I may one day go back to a
Okay.
law school.
Okay.
It
Okay.
just so happened that this opportunity came up, and so at my specific business school, we have a pretty large, by comparison, Department of Business Law and Ethics. So we have
Okay.
about 25 to 30 people, and so we teach the business ethics and uh, the kind of business law course for undergrads and for MBA students. And so it was just a really good opportunity, but still, in many ways, my heart is still at law schools, and I still write for law journals, and I still interact with law professors a lot.
Thank you. Thank you. I think, that's what I was going to ask you, related to your research. Now that you're in a business school, are you having to target different journals for the business school, or are you able to continue publishing in, the same law journals, and hope that, will meet the requirements that you have for promotion?
So in deciding to move to a business school, that was really important. And so I have continued to publish in law journals. If it had required me to change, I wouldn't have moved. Because I wanted to continue publishing the same kind of scholarship.
Okay. Good. And since there are no changes in the journals that you are targeting, I'm interested in learning about any other, changes that you may be experiencing coming from a law school to a business school that have been either challenging or just enjoyable, doing that transition.
Mhm. So, huge change in just kind of the size of the school that I'm dealing with. There's a whole extra layer of administration because now I'm in a department where before I was just at a law school, so you just talk directly to the dean. So that's very different. It's fascinating in some ways, right? I teach undergrads now instead of law students who are grad students. So that has been quite different. I'm also pretty used to teaching classes where people self-select into my classes because they're really interested in the topic. Teaching business ethics is different. This is a required class that isn't necessarily seen as central to every student. And
Mhm.
so it's a different kind of work that I'm doing in that I have to get students interested in the subject, whereas at law schools, they came in being interested in the subject. So it's different. It is nice in some ways to have right this much bigger school, but then in other ways, I do miss teaching law students and miss teaching some tax classes.
Okay, okay, that makes sense. And I imagine, as you mentioned, teaching undergraduate students and law school student is very different. Um, what other changes in terms of there's the school, like where were you living before you transitioned to the business school? Because I know sometimes moving from
Mhm,
one city to another,
mhm.
from one state to another can be very challenging. Were you already living in the same city or state or?
So it was a little strange in that I was actually visiting at another school in South Carolina when I took this job, but officially I was still an employee of the University of Louisville. And so Louisville is only about an hour and a half from Bloomington, where the Indiana University is located at. And so in that way, it wasn't a huge change. And so now, despite living in Bloomington, I live in Indianapolis, and Indianapolis is also not far from
Yeah.
Louisville either. So in terms of area, it wasn't much of a change. However, I moved during the pandemic, and so that was all very strange.
Yes, yes, it was a lot of strange things happening during the pandemic. And you mentioned South Carolina. I spent some time at University of South Carolina and have visited Bloomington. And it's a nice city, very college
Mhm.
base, nice university, nice campus. So I hope that's helping as you transition. And what year are you currently in the business school now? So when you say you made the transition in during the pandemic, so maybe was it 2020, 2021?
Exactly,
Okay.
2020. Uh-huh.
Okay,
Yes.
okay. And what have you been able to maybe focus on doing these past 4 years and related to your research,
Mhm.
things maybe you've published,
Mhm.
if you don't mind sharing as you build or continue building your research program.
Mhm. And so the last 4 years, I would say that I built up my research in equality law pretty generally. And so one strand of that has been kind of the Biden administration and their racial equity efforts. And so that included some of the pandemic aid, some of the American Rescue Plan aid as well. And so I'm going to be coming back to that this summer. I'm writing another paper on that as well. But I also moved into some new areas as well. So I worked on a paper with someone else, with a professor at Georgia at their business school on the fintech industry and some of the promises that that industry made about fixing or helping with wealth inequality and how some of those promises have fallen short. And so most recently, I've been working on a paper that's soon going to be published on the Community Reinvestment Act. And so that act encourages banks to invest in low and moderate income communities. And so we are about to publish a paper in which we encourage for more changes and for race to be considered explicitly in some circumstances. And so I've kind of been building my work, not just in saying, well, tax is this place that can help with wealth and income inequality, but also saying here are some other laws and some other things that can be done as well. So I brought in a bit of my work as well.
Perfect. Do you mind sharing some of those inputs you've brought in a little bit more? It's for the paper that you're publishing soon.
Oh, on the Community Reinvestment Act?
Yes.
Yeah, so in that paper, so there were new regs that were being put into place this year. And so we were recommended, first of all, that the Community Reinvestment Act only applies to banks. And so in today's society, many non-banks and other financial institutions and fintechs are also involved in providing credit to individuals. So one of our proposals was just, well, we need to apply this to non-banks as well, and to say that non-banks should also be involved in providing services to low and moderate income communities. And then the second part of the proposal was just to say, here are some circumstances where we think that race should be taken into account more explicitly to ensure that some of the benefits of the Community Reinvestment Act are reaching those individuals.
Thank you. Thank you for sharing that. Very important work, very relevant. As you were talking, I couldn't help to think about the the trends in the news now related to to some of the backlash that diversity work is receiving, whether it's education, investment, entrepreneurship, and I'm sure that is affecting or maybe relevant to your work. If you have anything more you would like to share along those lines besides what you've already shared.
And so yes, backlash has been very relevant to my work. And so, for example, when I wrote about the Biden administration and the American Rescue Plan Act, some of the aid that was in that act, some of the aid to small businesses and also to farmers was struck down by courts. And so one of the things that I've been dealing with in my work is, well, there are all of these roadblocks that are being put into place by courts. What do we do about that? And so a paper that is forthcoming in 2025, right, it's been accepted for publication, but we're still working through it, is
Congratulations.
about, oh, thank you, is about living in this world of enforced color blindness, where the court says, well, no matter how much proof you have of discrimination, you basically can't use race-conscious remedies. And so that paper is trying to come to terms with that and suggesting that perhaps we can use equality of opportunity in some ways to bridge some of the gap. But something has been lost and the gap can't be totally bridged. And so no is even more difficult now to consider racial equity.
Yeah, exactly. And I'm thinking of two things here as you were talking. One, of course, is you are an attorney who's also being, able to use your law lens while you're doing this work and seeing how it affects, small businesses and these different, backlashes. And I'm wondering, if you can share, have you been able to leverage your expertise as a lawyer while dealing with, acts that are affecting small businesses and the backlash. So you have a very, interesting or multiple lenses that you can use to think about some of the work that you're doing compared to someone who may be straight, from a business, training and with a PhD and so forth and so on. Yeah.
So right, to some extent, I would say that I analyze the cases, the legal cases, both at the Supreme Court and at lower levels, kind of a bit more than a business school professor would, right? So I try to look in at, well, this is what the court is doing, and this is what the courts have been doing. This is how they're departing from what they were doing before. And these are the ways in which they seem to be returning to what they were doing many decades ago. And so in some ways, my focus is a lot more on that. Of course, right. Because I'm a legal scholar, I will also make proposals to change the laws and to change the way that we're interpreting things. I think some of the more exciting things that are happening, I'm not doing them myself, but some of my colleagues in tax law right now, very much in DC, are working with the government on collecting more racial data from uh, via the IRS and figuring out a lot more of the ways in which the tax system is hurting Black and minority individuals disproportionately. So I write about some of that, but some of my colleagues who are actually in DC are working with the government on some of these issues.
Thank you for sharing. Now, I'm interested in thinking about your trajectory in the business school, which I believe, you're thinking about tenure. And if you are, what are the metrics that you may have to be thinking about compared to when you were in the business school? I mean, compared to when you're in the law school, and
Mm-hmm.
how if they may be different, given you're still publishing the same journals. So
Mm-hmm.
that has not changed. Have the numbers changed, or
Mm-hmm.
in terms of the number of articles or not? Yeah.
Mm-hmm. So there are some changes. I would say the measures of prestige are similar. I would say that there is a bit more of focus on numbers on the business school side as opposed to the law school side. I think the law school side, they are more willing to say, you can have less publications. We just want them to be really quality, where the business school side is more like you need to get publications.
Okay.
However, on the business school side, I will say that they are more open to co-authoring, so that is more common. And so that has led to some very interesting collaborations that I've gotten into. But yeah, the numbers are higher on the business school side of things, but the measures of quality are roughly the same, and so the same journals are deemed prestigious on both sides.
Thank you. Thank you. And if you had to give advice to someone who's interested in a career in a business school, uh, you've gone to a law school, a business school. Um, Now that you're, almost 4 years in, what would you recommend, that they should be thinking about if they're coming out of a PhD program or law school,
Mhm.
and whatnot? What would you be telling them to start thinking about now, as they make these transitions?
Mhm. Um, well, right, in both worlds, very much, right, publications are the coin of the realm. So of course, getting out there and publishing, being careful in making your choices and trying to, right, be strategic and trying to place well, because ultimately those first publications do matter a lot. Yes, you can move later on, but try to place well as early as you can. And then to consider kind of both sides of the coin. So at law schools, of course, they're gonna be a lot more understanding of your scholarship. With business schools, you may have to be more strategic and ensure that they are gonna appreciate your scholarships. Not all business schools are created equal. So at mine, some of these battles have been fought already, and so it's a lot clearer. But at all of them, they're not. And so if you're coming out from the law side of things, then I would say be really careful. If you're coming out on the business school side of things, I would say in some sense it's easier. If you're right, if you're coming to the business school, you're gonna know what is involved, etc. And if you're coming to the law school side of things, though, then I would say then you need to know about law journals and be ready to publish in some of those.
Very well said. The last topic I want to touch on is the National Center for Faculty Development and
Uh-huh.
Diversity, right? So you're getting excited. So that's how I learned about you based on your involvement or the review that you shared. So if you can share what your experience has been, how did you learn about the National Center for Faculty Development and Diversity, and what has it meant for you, and how you became, more involved with the faculty program and so forth and so on.
So I would say that the NCFDD is probably uh the biggest plus in my move from law school to business school. And so that has nothing to do with the substance of law schools or business schools. It just so happens that Indiana University was involved with the NCFDD. They were a member already. And so when I came here, it was suggested to me as an option. I still had to apply. It cost quite a bit of money, so the campus had to say yes, but it was suggested to me by them as an option. And so I came in just with an open mind in that I still was struggling with being a writer as a professor, and how to figure that out on a daily basis, et cetera. And so I was just really open to trying something new. And so through the university, I signed up and I did the NCFDD, and it was difficult in some sense, but I was so open minded, and it was during the pandemic, and I wasn't teaching that semester, so I could focus on it. And so through the NCFDD, I figured out how to write daily and how to plan my writing, and so my productivity has increased quite a bit since I did that program in 2020, and it has led me to becoming a lot more successful. So I'm very much a believer in the program and the support that it offers.
Wonderful. And just for those who may not know, the National Center for Faculty Development and Diversity, also known as NCFDD, is an independent faculty development organization that supports faculty at all career stages. It's offering focus on mentoring, work-life balance, productivity, and more. And several universities throughout the US have formal membership with an NFCDD, where faculty members can join based on that uh, membership without having to pay extra. Or it could be the other option where maybe the school will pay individual membership for each faculty. I know at George Washington University, there's the school-wide membership where everyone can join, and that's just continue to receive your emails, the emails that they're sent,
Mhm.
and saw a quote from you and decided to look you up and learn more about your work. And you said that you did the NFCDD. Are you referring to the Faculty Success Program? Because I know they have the
Yes.
general
Uh-huh.
membership where you receive weekly emails. There's also the
Mhm.
book that Kerry and Rockmore wrote about how to become tenured without losing your soul.
Mhm.
But can you talk a little bit more about the Faculty Success Program, which is,
Mhm.
I think, a summer program, but in addition to the weekly emails that they send.
So yes, I did the faculty success program, which a lot of people call a writing boot camp. And so that's a 12-week program in which you are broken up into small groups, at about four to five, I think. And so in those small groups, you talk once a week and you discuss. It's an accountability group. You discuss
Mhm.
what you did that week, and then there's kind of like weekly videos, homework, etc. And so you learn new skills through those 12 weeks, and in many ways you learn to look inward and be really honest with yourself, both about what you want, how you are spending your time, and whether your goals are aligning with the way that you're spending your time. And so it's a time of introspection, but through learning those skills, you kind of develop this structure that you can apply in future semesters. And so from that program, I still keep up with my accountability buddy, and we still talk every week. and check in on how we're doing.
All right, all right. Well, I think I don't think you know I can say anything more because I have not actually done the success program, but I hear very good things, and I'm curious to know when you said that the school had to pay, was it just the regular membership and then had to pay for the faculty success program, or just they have a regular membership and then they just had to pay uh, for the faculty success program and how much it costs?
So I think that the school has a membership, right, that allows me to look at the programs and everything. But then to do that faculty success program, then they have to pay a tuition, right? And so that's several $1,000s. And so luckily my school already knew about this, how successful the program was. But for other schools, I think given the numbers and how successful the program has been, generally you can convince them to pay that tuition. But yeah, I think it's like $4,000 or $5,000 that it costs for the
Okay,
semester.
okay. All right. Well, thank you very much. I have no more questions for you. I'm sure you know whoever listens to this video can learn many different aspects of your journey, but also what it's like to work in a law school compared to a business school. Are there any last minute, last words you would like to share, or should we just say goodbye?
Just like with a lot of other things in life, it takes a village. And so there are tons of professors, colleagues, etc., through the years who have helped me on this journey from the very beginning. And so that's extremely important. Sometimes I think we look at people's CVs and we get really intimidated, but right, it took a ton of help and time to get to where any of us are today.
Very well said. Well, thank you very much. I hope everyone who listens to this will enjoy it. Goodbye.